Honorable members, order.
Switch on the microphone. Switch on the microphone. We're rising on a point of order.
On a point of order.
The microphones must be on.
Welcome to Politics Unmuted, where our microphones are never muted and we turn up the volume on all things political. I'm Mbali Ntuli, the politics editor for News 24.
And I'm Mbali, the politics reporter.
And I'm Jason Felix from News 24 in Parliament.
Welcome to the second episode, guys. Jason, you joining us from Cape Town, and Lizeke and myself are in our Johannesburg studios. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Kanita. It's good to be here again. It's our second installment, so I'm looking forward to the discussions.
Thanks so much. I'm standing on the N1 for better phone signal, and this is my first time on this podcast. It's really awesome to be here.
I'm imagining you just, literally on the side of the N1, reporting from protests. Okay, so coming up, guys, we'll be talking about the official opposition, the Democratic Alliance, the state that party's in, and what needs to happen for the DA to rebuild itself and become a viable alternative for South African voters. It's had a messy few years, to say the least, but just in a few days, about 2,000 DA delegates will meet virtually for their elective conference, and they will have to choose between KwaZulu-Natal MPL Mbali Ntuli or former Chief Whip John Steenhuisen, who's the acting leader, as the leader of the Democratic Alliance. It's obviously a very critical moment for the DA, both in terms of the state the party finds itself in, but also in the run-up to the 2021 local government elections. Can we kick things off by asking you, Liz, why should people care?
Well, it's quite crucial that we have a vibrant and a functioning opposition party, Kanisa. In terms of the DA has been the biggest opposition. We need an opposition that can highlight the pitfalls of the governing party. We need an opposition that is able to, pick out the issues that are underlying that the ANC is not delving into. We need an opposition that can ensure that our democracy is maintained. That's very important. We need, I might not agree with the DA in terms of its policies, in terms of where it's going, and sometimes I'm not too happy with the individuals within the DA, but I understand the reason why we need a party that is like the DA in this democracy.
Jason, why should people care about the DA's conference?
Well, I think we need to, the DA has become more and more relevant since the 90s, since days of Tony Leon and of course Helen Zille. At that time, the party was at its strongest. The DA has actually seen, like many other parties, have had problems. But I think they find their voice in respect of getting their message out there. And people should actually care. This party is in government in the Western Cape, South Africa's second biggest economy. It's in government in Cape Town, especially. It's the second biggest city. It impacts on close to 6 million people. It has ambitions to be in government at a national level.
Does it really now, Jason?
Does it really want to be in government and national? Let's just go there.
Look, they want to be in government.
You really think so?
Yes, I really think so. Look, Mbali Ntuli said in one of her letters that the party leader stands to be the president at any time. And I would want to agree with that. I think the DA in the next 10 years might not be in government, even the next 20 years. But certainly as the younger generation grows up and the DA obviously sorts its problems out, it can provide a better alternative for the ANC, which has been beset with problems from factionalism to corruption to actual governance. And it can be a better alternative to the ANC. But the DA is more relevant than most people think it is.
I'm inclined to disagree with you in so many points that you've made, Jason. I agree that there is a need for the DA in South African democratic politics. But in terms of I mean, where we've seen the DA leaning and how it compares to the ANC now. Factionalism in the DA exists just as much as it does in the ANC. It's just more heightened in the ANC because of its stance as the governing party. We've seen the DA have its own flaws in terms of governance in places like Tshwane, in places like Nelson Mandela Bay, in places like Johannesburg, for instance. And in terms of the party in itself wanting to get to a point where they govern the entire country, that's still up for debate. That might be decided on in this conference, and that's why this conference is such a tipping point for the DA, because this is where we realize whoever takes over, whoever leads in the party, whether it be Helen Zille, John Steenhuisen, Mbali, Mike Moriarty, it will kind of give us an idea, and what is said after will give us an idea of where the DA is going. And I'm not sure if the DA is leaning towards governing the country. I think the DA is quite comfortable in its position as the opposition.
So I think that the 2016 local government elections was really an important sort of milestone for the DA in two respects. So the first of it is that it obviously had a huge increase in support in the local government elections, and you see it maybe not clinching municipalities outright, but increasing their support dramatically, especially in municipalities in Limpopo, that kind of thing. Yeah. You did see an uptick for the DA, but it also proved to be a little challenging in the sense that when it got into the governing side, and you're not governing cohesive communities or areas like City of Cape Town and the Western Cape, you realize that governance is actually really hard, let alone governing through coalitions. And so, Jason, this is why when we said, really does the DA want to be a governing party, I get the sense that it's almost resolved that governing South Africa, especially governing South Africa from after the ANC, is going to be it's going to be a huge challenge. Lizeka had a different word in mind, but it's going to be a terrible feat. And so I think that's where you kind of have the sentiment brewing, especially after the 2019 general elections, where the DA almost, or sort of the core of the DA, almost resigning itself to be a protector of minority interests almost, and moving away from what was effectively a Helen Zille project to make the DA almost an ANC light, more palatable to South African voters, and really a viable alternative to the DA. If you just look at the policies that the DA has been punting since its policy conference, it gives me the indication that it really wants to protect a status quo instead of, reaching out and appealing to voters. But Jason, I mean, if you disagree with us, you can you can say so.
I disagree in some respects. The DA has made a few blunders. I think they've admitted to those problems. But I think the leadership crisis within the DA or within the party has also added to them not getting their message out there, or getting a clear message out there as well. I do think with regards to next year's election, the DA is targeting obviously Cape Town, and obviously retaining Cape Town and trying to get back into Tshwane and Johannesburg. But I think we are a bit unfair on the DA. I would agree that they have a lot of problems, they have a lot of issues, but what political party doesn't have issues? I mean, the ANC is but one party that has its own issues. The EFF has its own issues. I think I think rightfully so, we are placing a lot of emphasis on the DA because they're the biggest opposition and the second opposition in Parliament, or the biggest opposition in Parliament. But I do think they have ambitions, and I do think with time they will be able to get to that. And when I say time, I mean at least the next 30 years.
What I wonder with, and I see Jason's point, and I love the fact that he is totally at odds with us, because that's how debate and ideas and democracy works. But what I wonder with the DA in terms of the policy, the most talked about or criticized or contentious policy is the policy around race, and the DA rejecting they're rejecting race as a proxy for disadvantage. That in itself tells me that the DA has recognized that it's lost its traditional voters, and it needs to appease them. It needs to appeal to those voters. And to me, it doesn't ring true. It doesn't sound true, or it doesn't resonate with me as a Black South African that the DA is appealing to me, that the DA wants me to be part of its little club, if I could say.
So the one interesting thing that I've seen since that, and I've obviously criticized the DA for that policy position, and they've hit back at us, and and that's all in the interest of freedom of expression, I suppose. But the one point that I didn't think about, and I can see where the DA or those in the DA who are punting this view and this policy, where they sort of hope that it won't go completely wrong for them, is this explanation, as simplistic as it is, that BE didn't help ordinary South Africans. And it only made Patrice Motsepe rich and Cyril Ramaphosa rich. And so if you take that to ordinary South Africans who have seen state capture and who have seen, the family members of councillors enrich themselves and family members of mayors enrich themselves, then it almost isn't as a blunder as we, the chattering class, looking into that policy see it as. So we see it as a blunder in the sense that, how can you exclude race from transformation? Race has to be a criteria for transformation, because race was the criteria in disadvantaging people because of apartheid.
So policy head Gwen Gwenya tried to explain this. She said that what they believe by doing away or rejecting race as a proxy for disadvantage, what they're saying is that what it means is that poverty is used as a metric, and what it means is that the means test that is used, you can help the poor by using that means test of poverty. That's fair and well.
But you don't consider that poverty is as a result of racism.
Exactly. That's fair and well. But it's absolutely crucial. I mean, we are at our toddler stage, for lack of a better word, in terms of our democracy, in terms of where we are as South Africa. We're in our economy, where we want to progress. We're still discussing issues like land expropriation without compensation. Yeah. And we need to, this plan for me doesn't speak to the ordinary South African. And I will never change my mind about that.
So Jason, is this conference about these issues? Is this a proxy fight between the two factions, or is it as good as sealed, and whoever the DA leader is inconsequential?
I think for the DA, this conference is basically just to get the leadership crisis out of the way. But I do think also that the issue of race in particular is gonna bite them. You can't go to an electorate and speak of transformation and not speak of race. I mean, race issues is a terrible issue in our country. The two, transformation and race, always goes together because of given the apartheid history and given what has happened in our country in the past. And I think you are quite correct when saying that, Lazeka, that as an ordinary South African and as a voter, that cannot resonate with you. But what I do think is that this race issue and a lot of these policies that they've come up with, they're going to have to rescind these decisions. I predict that the DA will have to go back to the drawing board, and because they will see that firstly they'll lose support in areas like in Khayelitsha, here in Cape Town, where they have got a big support base. Almost 100% sure they will lose support in the towns of Johannesburg, of Soshanguve and Soweto and those, and they will be forced somehow to go back to the drawing board and find another policy that will appease South Africans, because you cannot speak of transformation and not of race. The two goes together, and I think this conference, whoever comes out as the winner of this conference or the winners of this conference, they will have to serve for that dilemma, and it's going to be one hell of a problem if they don't fix it now going into the future.
So let's take a step back and figure out, how did the DA find itself in this quagmire of its leadership crisis, right? So it's almost a year ago.
Oh God, yeah.
You remember the time?
I remember the
Okay,
day,
so
the hour and the minute.
when Musi Maimane resigned from the DA, Liz, just point that picture for us a year ago, what happened and how we got to where we are now.
Well, let's start off in the elections in August, where the DA comes out having lost. It wanted to dislodge the ANC here in Gauteng. It was hoping to bring the ANC down to below 50%, if I'm correct, in the country. And it saw itself, taking some of the provinces. And it lost. And, instead of gaining any momentum, it lost its traditional voters.
And the DA always prided itself, is that the word, prided itself on the thing that it grew every election. South Africa, it's the only party that grows, because remember all of these tiny parties like COPE and whatever, they peaked and then they declined over the subsequent elections. So that was its selling point, is that we were the only party that kept on growing.
Exactly.
And then 2019 happens.
And then 2019 happens. And then Musi Maimane makes this very confusing, I'm trying to find the word, I'll say confusing decision to have a panel, because there were discussions within the federal FedEx, which is the federal executive, which is almost like your NWC of the ANC,
the National Working Committee that meets twice a month.
Exactly, and the decision was that they need to review what happened, where did they go wrong, and Musi puts up this panel of DA veterans, as if you will allow, Tony Leon and two others, I forget their names, and they come up with this predictable report, which puts the majority of the blame on the situation, on the DA's decrease, on the DA's downfall. Tony Leon and the two other gentlemen whom I've forgotten, I think one of them was Capitec owner or something like that. They decided to, their report comes back calling Musi out, pointing the finger at Musi as him being the one who's responsible for the decline of DA votes.
So, but Jason, I mean, he was the leader of the DA, and so the buck had to stop with him, right?
Correct, yes. I fully agree with you on that one. He had to take all the responsibility. I mean, he was the face of the party. He was the poster boy of the elections at the time. But I think Musi Maimane was a weak leader. He never got a grip on the party. I think Helen Zille's influence in the party as well. I think when she left the position as Western Cape government premier, I think that's when all their problems started. Because I almost get the feeling that Helen Zille had nothing to do with her time. Now she had to, be involved in the party. And I mean, the fact that she still has this high position within the party is it still boggles my mind. And I think Helen Zille's influence, and Musi could never really be himself, if I can put it that way. And given that he was described as a weak leader, and given the fact that he could never get a grip on the DA and get a grip on its internal policies and its internal factions and its internal wage driving, he really couldn't control it. And I think, as sad as it is, he had to take the fall for the party, and that's what leaders do.
So then what happens a year ago is that Musi jumps before he's pushed.
Yes. Essentially, after the watershed election of Helen Zille as federal council chair, which, I mean, the re-emergence of Helen Zille alone was enough to drive Musi bonkers, because it was at a point where Musi had been given the baton by Helen, his mentor. He was Helen Zille's protege.
Can I say something very controversial? I think that this entire Zille-Musi fallout proved to us what we were saying all along, that it was borrowed power, right? And Musi was the only person who didn't know that.
You think? I think he knew exactly.
Then why did he take it so personally when she came back to reclaim her power?
I think at some point, Musi got too cocky for his own good.
No, and he thought he was there legitimately. He thought...
No, I don't believe that. I think Musi should have known, because when you speak to the black leaders within the DA, they always say, we told him that if you align yourself with these people, with the certain faction of the DA,
and you get parachuted within such a short period of time.
Yes, and you mushroomed into this position, and you think that you have the power. I'm telling you, we are telling you, we've seen this happen with Lindiwe Mazibuko. We've seen this happen with some of our leaders in provinces or even in parliament. And you are bound to get hurt. You are going to get stung. And he didn't listen. But I think that at some point when the issue of race, when Helen started tweeting, and then the Patricia DeLille situation, I think at some point he really did see himself as holding the reins in the party until Helen came back and said, no, this is my party.
Yeah. And so he leaves the party, and then there's interim elections, and John Steenhuisen becomes the interim leader. And now this entire year there was preparations for this conference, which is happening virtually. Jason, is it a...
Can I just add that Musi Maimane actually, if I think back, Jason, maybe you might remember as well, Musi didn't initially decide to leave the party after him and Mashaba's resignation. He came into that federal council saying, we need a policy direction.
Sure.
We need to... because you can't tell me that the buck stops with me when our policies haven't been framed, when we don't have a clear policy agenda. Yeah. They've been saying, to a point where I think Gwen resigned as policy head, and now she's back. So there has been a back and forth about these policies, and that was the tipping point for Musi, when it seemed like he was... there was a battle there about whether they should go to policy or not. And then Federal Council finally conceded. But
that there should be a policy conference.
But there should be a policy conference.
That's definitive on what the party stands for.
Exactly. But it was too late for both Ethel Trollip and Musi Maimane.
So, Jason, you were saying about, your analysis of this virtual conference that's happening this weekend. Going in, there's already some red flags, right?
Around the credibility issues, and I think whoever wins it, whoever comes out as winners of this conference, will have to take forward the DA's position on race, on all the other issues that they have spoken about, the policies that they have agreed upon. They would have to carry the baton and carry it forward, no matter how difficult it might be. And trust you me, it's going to be difficult, especially with the race policy which they have agreed to and which they have adopted. That, for me, is going to be the defining factor. The DA appears to be not too worried about this race issue, not too worried about the issues around state capture and around corruption and around a lot of things. They are stumbling ahead, going forward with it. And I do think it's going to cost them at the elections next year, because when you look at transformation and race especially, to bring back what Lizeka has said, is that this issue doesn't resonate with their policy, their race policy doesn't resonate with the ordinary voter or with ordinary South Africans. And I don't think they will be able to convey this message to the electorate next year.
So let's talk about the two candidates, Mbali Ntuli and John Steenhuisen. Mbali Ntuli, a young, up-and-coming young leader. She comes from the youth movement of the DA, right, Lizeka? Yeah. Worked her way up, has had very public spats with Helen Zille, is known to be a firebrand. What do you know about her?
Mbali, in her time during as the youth leader of the DA, kind of propelled the youth league or the youth structure in the party, and made I would say, as opposed to a successor or predecessor, Makashule Ghana, she took it a step forward, did what Helen Zille was doing in National. And when she moved into her position in the legislature, she was given a constituency which was in the rural parts of KZN. And she made sure that within that constituency, where the region has 11 municipalities, from 2014 to 2016, she was able to ensure that each municipality in that district with 11 municipalities, that the DA has a presence. And the DA has volunteers, branches, and activists. That ensured that the DA has got a leg to stand on when it went into negotiations with the IFP. The IFP being one of the kingmakers here in Johannesburg. And that's how they managed to have that coalition. So she was very integral in the talks that led to the party clinching Johannesburg. So that in itself kind of tells you she's a woman who's in the ground.
A workhorse.
She's a workhorse. She's got the ground forces. She can mobilize. They need that, which is absolutely crucial. I mean, we kind of know, we kind of can predict who's going to win.
We'll get to that in a bit.
And whoever wins, that's why, and I agree with Jason, that whoever wins must decide. I would advise whoever wins to decide to do a kind of like an ANC program of unity. You need to ensure that your Mbalis, the disenfranchised.
Well, I think that's not a very good example. No, but it's also not a very good example because we saw where the unity of Didi Babusa has brought us to the ANC.
But you need to ensure that group, that disfranchised group, your Pumziles, your Makashule Ganas, your Mbali Ntulis, that young, vibrant black youth, which was able to go into the trenches, which was able to ensure that it mobilizes that support that you need in your Sowetos, your rural KZNs, your Khayelichas. You bring it back. You must make sure that you give them space. You must make sure that you give them positions that, they don't feel undermined. They don't feel useless.
And so John Steenhuisen, Jason, obviously comes from KZN, has come to Parliament. He really was a good chief whip of the DA. I don't know if that means he'll be a good DA leader, but he was really a good chief whip. What's your experience?
I think, I agree in some sense that he was a good parliamentary leader. But that doesn't mean that he can be a good party leader, because in Parliament he deals with a 90-member caucus, I think, 85-member caucus. With a party, he deals with structures, he deals with factionalism, he deals with branches who are at times unhappy. And like Zeka said, I think people like Pumzile van Damme, people like Makashule Ghana, people like Mbali Ntuli who can go into the trenches. You can go into your Umlazis, your Khayelichas, your Soshanguves. You can go into the townships, get the votes, and work hard for the party. You know, have to deal with a black caucus, or not say a black caucus, but let me say prominent black leaders who are logically disenfranchised and who do not want to work for the party as hard as what they did before. So now you got to deal with party members, very senior party members, who almost don't have your back. So it's complex issues. And I don't think when he became the interim leader of the DA, I thought to myself that this is not going to be a good step. Firstly, for transformation, and secondly, for the black leaders and the very strong black leaders within the party. We saw what happened to Mbali Ntuli, who was an excellent leader and an even better parliamentary leader, because she gave the ANC a run for their money. She gave Jacob Zuma a run for his money. She literally put herself out there. The DA never appreciated that. Now with John Steenhuisen, comes from KwaZulu-Natal, very influential province, but the DA is not so influential even in KwaZulu-Natal, let alone the rest of the country. So he's going to deal with many complex problems, and I think that comparing the parliamentary caucus to what is happening in the party, where it's ever changing, where problems are ever growing, where there's every single day there's a new challenge for the DA. I think it's going to be a difficult task, and I don't think though he will be up to the task, because he will have the support of people like Helen Ziller. He will have the support of the parliamentary caucus, of the federal executive, and some or most provincial leaders. And I think that's where Musi failed, because he never had the support of a strong federal chairperson. They threw him under the bus. I think the current grouping is not going to throw John Steenhuisen under the bus easily, unless, of course, something dramatic happens. But I do think that he's not the greatest. He's not the greatest leader for the party. I think Mbali Ntuli would be a better leader. Firstly, she's a woman. Secondly, she's young. She's a firebrand politician. She's a fire starter. She's absolutely someone that can get in there. She's in your face. She's taken on people like Helen Ziller, who many people fear. She doesn't fear Helen Ziller. And I think that's the kind of leader that...
So who's going to win, Jason? Your prediction?
My prediction?
Come on, Jason. We all know.
Jason, come on.
I would really hope for Mbali Ntuli to win.
You'd hope, but do you predict that she will win?
I don't think she has enough support, honestly. I think...
Look at Jason answering like a politician.
But you know what? I also think that Mbali knows, she knows why she contested these elections. It was, for her, when I spoke to her, it wasn't necessarily, I mean, a win would be great, but it was... She wanted that healthy contestation within the party. She wanted for that marginalized few ideologically to also have a voice within the party. She said to me, whatever comes out of this, what I want and what has inspired me is that people within the party and outside of the party are saying that they've been motivated, inspired by her running, because she has upset the establishment. The expected person to take over had a run for his money. And that was what Makashule Ghana did, essentially, when he went against John Steenhuisen during the interim elections. It's the same playbook that they have.
I suppose it's testing... the democracy within the party, but obviously the party has really fell short when it comes to its internal democracy in the run-up to this conference. I think if there's anything the party has to take away when it reflects whoever wins, regardless of who wins this conference, is that its internal democratic processes were really not it. And we have criticized the ANC many times.
And they have criticized
they've criticized the ANC many times. And the fact that you had rules like, there was no public debates, which there was in the past. And it's just the hypocrisy of it, because when the ANC said this previously, the DA, before the Nazareth conference, was egging on the ANC to have these type of debates, and now it finds itself in the same position.
They've got no leg to stand on.
No, absolutely. So I think, if anything, the DA's internal democratic processes are going to be tested. I think that whoever wins, and we kind of have an idea of who's going to win, but I do think that the party will show itself very soon as to what role it's going to play in South African politics, and whether it's going to continue assert itself as this sort of formidable opposition that took on issues of Nkandla and state capture and really set the agenda in that way. That's all we have for you today from all of us at Politics Unmuted. Thanks for listening. This episode was produced by my colleague Catherine Rice and recorded by Shantae Schatz. The music is courtesy of Getty Images and Epidemic Sound. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe or follow the hashtag Politics Unmuted. We'll see you again next week.